Hi, Viola Rose here, and I'm coming on today to make a video about my vegan journey on and off over the years and what that looked like and what that has led me to understand for myself and the way I live my life. Now, I realize that this is a touchy subject. A lot of people don't want to hear about veganism or animal rights, and they can easily get defensive. And so if that's the case and you don't want to hear about this, then there's no need to listen if you don't want to. But many people actually do ask me about why I live this way and what's behind it and what's my understanding after so many decades uh, in this way, and also not then bouncing off and not being vegan and then being vegan. So what is my understanding and what do I have to share about it? So I thought I would actually just make a video. And so if this is something that could be triggering for you, then all love and respect, and you can just pass it by. But listen in if you're curious. It's an interesting journey that I've been through and the insights that I have had about how it affects me emotionally, spiritually, when I'm vegan, when I'm not. And so let's just get started. So when I was a teenager, I was really into the Smiths. And oh, by the way, I'm on an exercise bike here. I've just built this stationary, like exercise bike, homemade desk with a couple of kitchen chairs. And then, so now I'm not sitting still while I'm on the computer. And I feel like that's something that is actually helping me to stay human. Um, anyway, so I am a teenager and I am never quite fitting into the mainstream ever. And as much as I tried earlier in my teenage years, I was just a weirdo. And so I found one of the only things you could find as in the 80s as a teenager that was not like the mainstream, and that was alternative music. And so I was really into like Kate Bush and The Cure and the Smiths, and I loved the Smiths. And I would sing those songs because Morrissey is such a crooner, right? He's such a yodeler. And so if you're into the Smiths, you can like sing them at the top of your lungs and just get like so lost in it. So I was really into the Smiths. And they have an album called Meat is Murder and a song actually called Meat is Murder. And I'm just singing along and I'm singing along to the Smiths. I know the songs inside and out. And one day I actually listen to what I'm singing, the lyrics to this song, Meat is Murder. Like that the flesh you so fancifully fry, it is not natural, tasty, and kind. It is unholy stench of murder. It was like hard hitting. And when I heard it for the first time, like really heard it, I was like, oh, that's real. That's true. Like meat is murder. Like we're eating beautiful animals. What am I doing? It takes time when you're growing up to individuate and start to come to your own conclusions about religion, about society, about any of the things, right? But because I was such a little bit of a weirdo who never quite fit in, it was easier for me to individuate. And so I was able to hear those lyrics and make a decision for myself. And I'm still living at home. And I was like, that's it. I'm going to become a vegetarian. So I did overnight, made the announcement to my parents the next day that I would be no longer eating meat and animals. And of course, that didn't go over very well at all. My dad kept trying to feed me steak. And so I didn't go vegan. I just went vegetarian. I didn't know really too much about dairy and whatnot. And I never caved in. Like I just did it. And that was a choice I made. And I found, I was still eating pretty mainstream at the time. So there were plenty of things I could eat that were just junk food and mainstream and pizza. I could eat cheese pizza and peanut butter sandwiches all day. And so then, shortly after that, I left and went traveling with the hippies and became like a rainbow girl. And only when I think a couple years later, I was having all these sinus infections because I was eating a lot of dairy, right? And somebody said to me, that's the dairy. And, it was so funny that I didn't even put that together. And I gave up eating the dairy and um, they all went away and I never had a sinus infection since. So my dad continued to have sinus infections his whole life. And I kept telling him, stop the dairy and it never landed. Okay. So then I'm 21. I had and I had come across books about raw foodism. Viktoras Kulnvolskis, his book Survival into the 21st Century. And I was hitchhiking across the country one night, got picked up by some people. We were going on our way to a rainbow gathering, and they had this book, Survival into the 21st Century, in their house, and I was so fascinated by it. I stayed up and read it all night long. And it talked about the journey into consciousness, where you're a meat eater, and then you're a vegetarian, then you're a vegan, then you're a raw foodist, then you're a fruitarian, then you're a liquidarian, then you have water, and then you're a breatharian. And I'm at this point 20. I think I'm 20 at this point. And I was like, that's my destiny, you know. I totally want this. So I went like raw overnight and was raw for 2 straight years, raw vegan, and always had this inclination for like breatharianism, which I've gone to 2 breatharian retreats over the years and have tried it, and it's still not quite sustaining, but like I understand it more. Anyway, that's a side story. So anyhow, then I'm on and off raw my whole adult life. Like I've been a month and a half raw now, like it comes and goes. But nonetheless, I'm not eating animals, I'm not eating dairy, and I'm not really eating eggs either. So I'm just being vegan for quite some time. And then in my early 30s, I ended up going to this peyote ceremony, very traditional, and in the teepee all night long. And when you take the peyote and you pray with the natives all night long, in the morning, they bring in the corn and they bring in the grains, the fruits, and they bring in the deer meat. And they pass it around the circle, and everyone like does this. And I didn't have any of the deer meat because I don't eat deer, right? And but nonetheless, it was interesting. But within a couple weeks after that, I found myself sitting across the street, across the table at a health food store from a guy that I was dating, and he had a whole chicken that he had gotten at the Ashland Co-op, and he was eating it, and something just kind of came over me, and I said, let me have a bite of that. And he's like, "What? You want a bite of this chicken?" And I took a bite of the chicken. And immediately in my body, something seemed to come alive that hadn't been alive in a long time. And I immediately, like without brain control or whatever, went right into the store, bought my own whole little roasted chicken, and came back out and joined him and proceeded to eat almost probably the whole thing. It was such a strange thing that happened. And then I think I ate it a couple more times since then. Um, and he then said, I have this deer meat that a friend gave me from a roadkill, and do you want to eat some? And I said, yes. And as soon as I ate the deer meat, the craving was over, and I didn't eat it again. So it was like something in this peyote ceremony needed to be in its completion for me to sort of honor the cycle of the ceremony. And then it was done. And then I had to just put it aside. And then there was a time about maybe 3 or 4 years later where um, I, through I think influence of a guy that I was dating, he's like, "You really need some sushi," or something. And I just did it. And then I found myself for about 6 months actually eating meat again. And I was doing it with just like the eco, natural, like buffalo and stuff. And I did. And I ate meat for about 6 months after that. And I felt different. I felt like a whole different person. And I also felt myself actually trying to encourage the people around me to eat meat. I had a friend who didn't eat meat in Ashland, and I had made some buffalo stew for a potluck, because now I'm a meat eater. And, I remember trying to encourage her. She's like, "I don't want your meat stew. Like, just because you started to eat it doesn't mean, I want to." And it was interesting to step back and note, wait, why am I trying to push this on other people, encouraging them to eat meat because I suddenly am? And then I had to look really deep within, and I found out that there was an inconsistency in my psyche, and that there was a dissonance that I was in, and that I was not spiritually, emotionally, and energetically aligned with what I was doing with my body of eating the meat, and that I think I was trying to justify it by encouraging others to eat it with me. Um, so I made the decision to then give it up again. And I had done eating of the eat meat long enough that I had settled into sort of whatever template it was that I would be holding, right? So when I gave it up again, you know, what I noticed was that I had created a sheath around my heart. And it was like an energetic blockage to try to block out the pain and the suffering that is in the animal flesh. Now, we know that we hold tension in our muscles and stress and emotions. That's why we get tense muscles and we get body work or we do emotional work and it clears it out, right? We know we hold emotions in our muscle. And so when I, I'm eating the animals, I was actually feeling that, but then it created a sheath around the heart so that I wouldn't feel it, and possibly also so that I wouldn't feel my emotional dissonance of eating the animals that wasn't aligned with my spirit. So it took a little time for this sheath to melt away, to get back to the state that I was in before. And I was in a pretty open-hearted state before. I had spent a few years living at Amma's ashram, in and out, and following Ammachi and being on a spiritual path. So I had had some heart opening that I felt closed, actually, when I started to eat the meat again. And remember, I'm just sharing my story. This is not a judgment on you or anyone saying that you have a closed heart if you eat meat. This was my personal experience. And and then since then, that was my early mid 30s. Since then, I haven't eaten it at all again. And yet I have, dated some guys who have gone through that journey of giving up the meat, and I have felt their heart soften. And actually open in a different, softer way. And so, and I work with the heart. Like this is work I do for the Awakening the Illuminated Heart workshop that I facilitate is all about getting into your heart and clearing the blockages that are around the heart. So I actually come to now recommend in the workshops that people just don't eat meat for a couple weeks before because maybe you can soften if there's anything there that can uh, get in the way of the heart. And it doesn't always work that way. I've had numerous people come to the workshop who get into their heart just fine and they eat meat, but it just depends on how you're built and how your sensitivity is. So let's talk about why. Why did I crave the meat and why did I eat it? And why did I eat that first bite of chicken and then go right back inside and get more? Well, my understanding of this is that, and this happens a lot with people. There's a lot of ex-vegans out there who say they start eating meat and they feel great. And it is possible that you are getting a flood of nutrition that you don't get as a vegan. Or it also may be possible that you're getting a flood of adrenaline. Depending upon how those animals were raised and killed, they can be in fear when they die. And then that fear becomes adrenaline in the blood and it becomes adrenalized meat. And so we get really high off it. Just like if you've heard about adrenochrome, which is something way deep down the rabbit hole, but that the blood can get adrenalized by fear and torture. So this is happening on some level to the animals. And then we eat them and we get really high off it. There is a high that comes with it. And my husband hasn't eaten meat now in about a year and a half or so. And he says he craves it. Like he'll feel the craving come on, like in a way that you would crave alcohol or something a little bad. Like he's like, oh, there's a dark seed in there that makes him crave it. And so, that's just some ideas about why it is. And you know what, even if, and I do fine on a vegan diet, maybe everybody doesn't, but I do. And I don't need it. And the research that I've done about humans being frugivores, like we don't need it either. We're like the gorillas and they eat leaves and greens and fruit mostly. And so I'm thriving on a mostly fruit diet as well. And so everyone's different, sure, but there's a lot of stuff out there about information with nutrition. So here's the thing for me is that for me, veganism, like I said, is about consent. It's not really about diet, and it's not really about if I was healthy or not. And so it's interesting when people who are vegan then become meat eaters again. I tend to think that they're doing it because they maybe were vegan for health reasons and then their health changed and now they're not. Although I have heard from some people who said that they were vegan for the animals and then they started to eat meat again. It's a touchy subject, I know. And so I'm not going to try to speculate about why anyone was or wasn't, except that for me, what I will say is that since my veganism has nothing to do with diet and my health, even though I feel really healthy and clear on a vegan diet, even if my health started to decline, and I was told over and over again I needed to eat meat for my health, I wouldn't do it. I would not do it. At this point, it's been over 20 years that I have been very, very committed to living a vegan lifestyle. And it's like, it doesn't matter if my health would be better by taking another's life. Like, I'm just not going to do that. I'm just not. Like, those beings are sentient. They have a life that they want to live. And who am I to play God and determine, well, your life isn't as important as my life. And so I am not going to take another being's life to serve my own life, because that is what they call speciesism, where you feel like your species is more important than other species. And there are some interpretations of the Bible that lead one to possibly think this way. Um, and yet there's a documentary out there called Christspiracy that really breaks that down, actually, that those are interesting translations of the Bible, but that Christ was probably a vegetarian. And so that's something else you can look into on your own. So I wouldn't do it. Like, it doesn't matter. It's like, I'm not vegan for myself. I'm vegan for the animals. It's a distinction. It's not a diet choice. It's a lifestyle choice. And you know what? I didn't actually really get this lifestyle choice until I moved to Portland, Oregon. So I had been now for like maybe about 5 years in my late 30s, have been vegan 100% at this point. And I moved to Portland, Oregon in 2007. And so I saw that they were having a vegan prom. And so I went to it. And I wasn't like part of a big vegan community or didn't really know much else around veganism. But I went to this vegan prom and they had literature on the table and I took it and I read the literature. And then they were recommending watching this documentary called Earthlings. And I watched it and my entire life changed. That movie was so profound to watch. And I have recommended to people, like, if they really want to understand and be in integrity with what they're eating and know where it's coming from with full consciousness and not with avoidance and dissonance, watch the movie Earthlings. It took me two settings to get through it, and I was sobbing on the floor in tears. And I still can't watch it again, but I watched it and I watched all the documentaries. And there's this meme out there, how to go vegan in 3.5 hours. Watch Earthlings, watch Forks Over Knives, watch Speciesism, and maybe there's one other. And you watch those in a row and it boom, it blows your mind, it changed your life. When I saw the suffering of the animals, and it's like in your face, like you're watching the animals, how they kill them, how they drag them behind cars, all the things that happen. And to come face to face with that was such a life changer, even though I was already eating vegan. I didn't understand until that point about a vegan lifestyle, which meant at that point I looked around my house and I saw my leather boots and I saw some leather items. Um, and I was like leather skin on a drum, like animal skin on a drum, leather items. And I was like, I don't want any of this in my life anymore, because what this is points to that. This skin on this animal was probably an animal that was incredibly tortured and um and suffered greatly. I don't want that vibration in my life. And then I proceeded to purge anything that wasn't vegan from my life, products or items or clothing or shoes or belts or wallets or any of that. I got rid of it all. Like, I kept a couple things like the down comforter, because those are hard to replace. And then if you've got it already, and it's actually useful, then um, why not keep it? I've had the same down REI sleeping bag for like 30 years. And I hope to just keep it forever so that I never have to replace it, because I won't replace it with the down one. So anyway, that's how I came to be a vegan. And then I started to kind of go to more vegan gatherings in Portland and really just learned about the lifestyle, and also learned that these people that I thought were super extreme weren't. They were just compassionate toward the animals. That was it. They just love animals and they want animals to have their own life. And and so I would see them out on the streets, with signs and protesting and whatnot like that. And I thought, why? That's so extreme. It's so intense. Why not just let people do their own thing? But then I came to realize that my own journey was one of only being exposed to other people. It's because I went to that vegan prom and I saw and I was educated. So I I found that I actually experimented a little bit when I lived in Portland of doing some, not protesting, but like outreach where people are holding signs before Thanksgiving, like this turkey just wants to be loved too. Like why do we have to have these rituals where we kill the animals and eat them? And I also found that it's fine to do, but it's also touchy to be right in people's faces. So I don't do any of that kind of outreach anymore because it's like forcing it on people when they walk by you in the store to see that. And I figured maybe a video like this is better because you can choose not to watch it or you can choose to, but I can also still have a voice and I can use that voice for people who maybe want to hear it and want to hear my journey or be inspired. So my ideas around this, are that like actually my husband recently had a conversation with someone about this. He just told me this a few days ago on the phone, he just mentioned that he'd been eating vegan and she immediately got defensive and said, yeah, but like the lions do it. And it was interesting to hear him starting to come to his own journey of just like, wow, but the lion is eating the animal out in nature where that's what they do. They catch it with their teeth and they eat it raw, fur and all. Like, do you want to eat it like that? No, we have to cook it and we pay someone else to kill it. There's not a nature in it. And then he also said, this was an interesting one. He said, but it comes down to consent. Like if there was a dog and you went to someone's house and there was a dog and that dog didn't want to be pet, would you pet that dog? He like really didn't want to be pet. And would you force him to let you pet him? And she was like, no, of course not. And he's like, well, but you're forcing that animal to die so that you can have lunch. And so it was interesting to watch how someone else, the longer they go without eating, can start to see in that vantage point. And to me, it's just so clear. It is so clear. I do have one mentor, um, Will Bagley, who I've worked with for years, and he's a very, very humble and spiritual man. And he'll talk about how you can't ascend to higher consciousness if you eat the choir. Like the choir is the animals of the earth. They are part of Mother Earth. We are part of Mother Earth. It's all the same thing. And so, how can you get to higher consciousness if you're putting death and torture and slavery into your body? Like the heart has to process it somehow. And so, I see that, and I see the way he gently just shares his truth, and people can read it or not. And so, inspired by that, that's why I thought to make this video. I feel like this is something that deserves to be looked at because the voiceless, the animals don't have a voice. They can't defend themselves. They're born into slavery. They're die in slavery and they don't get to speak up for themselves. And so I have had years where I have cried myself to sleep at night thinking about how many animals are being tortured and living in tiny little cages and on top of each other. And right now, in this very moment, how many animals are killed every single day for our food when there's other choices now. There's so many other choices. It is completely possible to get all your nutrition in other ways. Some people may push back against that and say, no, they're really thriving on an all meat diet. And I would posit that it's possibly not what you're adding in, but what you're leaving out. When you go on an all meat diet, you leave out everything else that's also really bad, all the inflammatory stuff like the sugar and the white flours and whatnot. But like I said, that is not so much the point here is the diet. Another thing that I really want to point out here and talk about is that I'm like way down the rabbit hole with the whole like simulation that we live in, and that this is a darker matrix actually. And there is Luciferian and satanic aspects to this reality or archonic nature to our reality. And when I look at it in that way, I can see that this whole system that we live in was designed for torture and suffering. And there's a term that Robert Monroe coined called loosh in his books. And that means that it's a strong emotional energy, usually negative energy, that is food for whatever beings created this. Like, why do the beings who created this realm need our worship? Like, worship is also a form of loosh. But suffering and torture is, from what I understand, a most advanced form of loosh. And so, why is this place designed that almost everything eats everything here? And it's like, and there's just such Not everything. Of course, there are the frugivores and animals that don't participate in that, but a lot of this cycle is things eating other things. And it looks dark and it looks intentional. And so much of this world is designed to keep us distracted and spinning our wheels right in the grind so that we don't see what's right in front of our face, which is that we are pure spark. We are a divine source and we have that access to that directly within. So when I look at the whole meat eating thing and how most humans on Earth are actually eating animal products that have been coming from animals, that's the animal bodies of animals that have lived tortured lives and die in fear. That to me is a satanic ritual. There are satanic rituals, which of like the Eucharist, the Christ ritual in church, where you take in the body and the blood of Christ in order to imbibe him into you. That is maybe an inverted satanic ritual, or maybe not, just outright. But nonetheless, when I look at that through the lens at what the meat eating is, it looks like a satanic ritual. And it looks like the largest satanic ritual that takes place on this planet. And almost everybody I know is participating in it every single day and doesn't even realize what they're aligning to. That to take in the flesh and the blood of a being that has been tortured in slavery and killed, and maybe that sounds dramatic, but if you look into what happens in the factory farms, just watch Earthlings. Look into it, and you will see that no, most of those animals are incredibly tortured because the workers who work there, it's so hard on their psyches that their psyches break, and they will torture those animals. And they are living in fear and filth, really. So to participate and ingest that is is a dark ritual. And I think that it changes the vibration of people in ways that are so subtle that they don't know. And this is what I have experienced for myself around the heart and the blockages and the sheath, the shield that I've placed around my heart when I have gone back into eating meat so that I didn't feel that suffering and I didn't feel my own misalignment with my integrity and my moral compass. And to live with a moral compass feels so good. And it's not about feeling like I'm better than others. It's not comparing myself to others at all. It's that I understand what feels true for me, what feels compassionate for me. And I'm going to live by that compass, regardless of the temptations, the pressure, or how good something smells or might taste when there's other options right there that I could eat. And that gives me fortitude. It gives me strength to live my life in all ways that are in right alignment and connected to directly what I perceive to be the highest spiritual principles. So that's my vegan story. A little long-winded, I know. If you made it this far, that's amazing. Um, and maybe some other time I'll make another video where I actually play the video for the song "Meat is Murder." I was actually gonna thinking I might do that a little bit in this video, like that play you a little bit of the song from "Meat is Murder" so you could hear some of the lyrics. But I brought it up and it was like somebody had put the lyrics on YouTube with beautiful images of animals, and I just started to cry. It just touched me so deeply that I thought, okay, I'm not up for that today, but maybe sometime I'll do that and we can watch it together. So if this helps you in any way, you're welcome to comment or tell me. I have had people over the years tell me years later that I had inspired them by just some things that I would share. And if this offends you in any way, but you still made it this far, I am truly sorry. It is not my intention to judge anyone. I just love the animals and I just want them to have the same rights that we do. And I'm speaking for them and I'm speaking for myself. And if I said any words that meant like I was speaking for someone else or judging anyone else, I am sorry. Okay, much love to you all.